Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first ever virtual GitHub Satellite workshop. Hope everybody's staying safe and having a pleasant time and looking forward for this workshop today with us. We're going to get right into it. Thank you again for making time. The topic for today's workshop is going to be about continuous integration with GitHub Actions. And I'm going to be your facilitator. My name is Prem. I'm an implementation engineer with the professional services team. And to help with the moderation, we have these lovely individuals, folks. We have Yadav, who is a solution architect. We have Thomas, who's a senior DevOps engineer, as well as John Wiebach is also a senior DevOps engineer from the professional services team. So these folks are going to be kind enough to moderate any questions that you might have in the Slack channel. And having said that, let's jump into today's agenda. So we're going to start off with a quick overview where we set some expectations and give a good context around the workshop on the content that's going to be covered today. We'll ease into the core concept of GitHub Actions. We'll take a look at the different parts that make GitHub Actions tick. Then we will dive right into the hands-on sessions that's divided into 3 different sessions. We will kind of time box it for at least 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how we progress and how good we are for time. All right. With that, let's start off first with a bit of an overview where I'm going to explain a little bit on the scope of the workshop, recap a little bit on continuous integration, and take a look at how GitHub Actions fits in that dimension of continuous integration for your software development workflows, right? This workshop, although we have set it to as level 300, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to build it up from a level 200 to a level 300, where we have a quick recap on the foundations and different parts of GitHub Actions, where I'll be talking about what is the difference between a workflow and an action, what are the different types of actions that's available, and how you could visualize or create a mental model between workflows and actions, right? In the hands-on exercises, we will be using GitHub Actions instead of building a GitHub Actions from scratch. Like I said, I will also emphasize the difference between what is a workflow and what is an action. The hands-on exercises will be guided by our Learning Lab bot, and that's going to be giving you all of the different steps that you need to complete. What I will be doing is I will walk through all of the different steps and instructions step by step before giving you some time to complete it on your own. Also, this particular continuous integration workshop is a precursor to the continuous delivery workshop, which Yadav will be presenting later on today. Let's talk about continuous integration. Uncle Bob, who's our very own Martin Fowler, he defines continuous integration as a software development practice where individual team members would be at least at a minimum be integrating changes frequently, at least for one time in a day. That kind of results into a team having multiple integrations, at least on a daily basis for the software that you're going to be building, right? So building on this principle, we at GitHub have been empowering and helping these big names or industry players who has invested their trust in us to help them in their continuous integration and continuous delivery journeys, right? Not only these big names, but we also have about 50 million developers who has trusted us with their projects. And I think what we have learned in that journey is a success recipe and drivers. We were able to narrow down these drivers into these 4 common elements, starting with a common philosophy where we at GitHub have a philosophy that helps us in our day-to-day routines. If you would like to know what is the Zen of GitHub, I would recommend you doing a curl call to this particular REST API endpoint that is on the screen. That particular curl call is going to give you some information of something which we call a Zen of GitHub. And from that Zen of GitHub, we kind of also dictate on how we communicate asynchronously. So for example, our philosophy on asynchronous communication is that in a team, we are going to be communicating across different time zones. We're not going to expect a reply in our time zone. We're going to have the trust that the team will be responding in a fashion where it's not going to block our delivery or integration of the project that we're going to be working on. Along with the asynchronous communication, we also have automations through chat ops that we do through Slack channels, which kind of helps us in our continuous delivery and integration journeys and the pipelines that we are going to build, right? So these are the four summarized success drivers. But when we speak about continuous integration and continuous delivery or even deployment, there are multiple different success drivers, and those drivers are well captured and published in this book called Accelerate, where we have Nicole Forsgren. A big shout out to her, who's also part of GitHub right now, to be putting in a lot of heart and soul into this book, because it speaks a lot about the different precursors to or drivers to successfully implement CI and CD in your software development workflows, starting from version control to deployment automation, trunk-based development, testing strategies, making sure security is being shifted to the left in your life cycle, as well as coming up with a very loose and flexible coupled architecture. We don't have the luxury of time to go through each and every one of these particular drivers. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on continuous integration from the dimension of how does GitHub Actions fit into this picture, all right? So to start off with how GitHub Actions play a big role in continuous integrations in your GitHub repos, we will first look at a official definition of GitHub Actions, where it's defined as an open platform that gives development teams the flexibility to create an automated software development lifecycle or workflow to meet your product development needs, right? So how does that actually translate into a technical implementation? So this is where I'm going to start talking about the core concept of your GitHub Actions. I will touch base from a configuration point of view, from a overarching point of view, as well as how you would be interacting and seeing it through your daily work. And I will do a little bit of diving in terms of the difference between what is an action, what is a workflow, and how does the lay of land work when you're going to actually implement the entire thing. All right. So we're going to start with configuration as code. So over here, when I talk about GitHub Actions, it's basically configuration that is emphasizing on how specific logics or operations are going to be run on a virtual infrastructure, all right? If you look at the diagram, it looks really very creative. And I think it kind of resonates well with the concept or philosophy of GitHub Actions, is because I would like to say that your actions is kind of limited or is boundless to the creativity of your development team or individual programmers, all right? If you could be really creative and think about a workflow that fits your software development lifecycle, that creativity can be translated into a configuration, which is through workflows or GitHub Actions that will help automate your CI and CD pipelines, all right? So in a nutshell, how does that look like? You would have a repository, and with this repository, you will need to consume or build a workflow that utilizes actions. That is done through a workflow file. And in the workflow file, you have various different jobs and steps that you need to actually configure. Based on the jobs, when the execution happens on a runner, you will be able to keep track of the different steps and the logs and the status of the workflows and the information that you might have been configuring in there, all right? So this is how or what you will be doing on a daily basis. But if I were to clarify a common misconception that we have seen cropping up in our engagements, people try to let's say, confused. I mean, people usually get confused between, like, what is a workflow, what is an action. So first up, let's clear the doubt. I'm going to say that, use this particular example, which is a light bulb that's going to represent an action, whereas the lamp over here is a workflow. So actions to a workflow is a light bulb to a particular lamp. So it's going to be a part of a workflow that you're going to be creatively configuring, right? And that configuration is going to end up as steps or jobs in an infrastructure file that you might have. Same goes to, from a light bulb, we move on to a tree and a leaf. Before you get any ideas, this leaf does not represent any herbs that you might know of. This is mainly for educational purposes. So this is just any leaf that's over there. Same goes a fork that is part of a dinner table set, right? You may say that these ideas are great, but how does it really translate into a technical standpoint? From a technical standpoint, if I were to look at the lay of the land, it's going to be where you have to define an action, right? And this GitHub action is basically a repository, and the action could be either a Docker container, a containerized action. It could be an action that you could build using JavaScript, or it could also be an action that is just using scripts. By using scripts, what I mean here is that you will have a run command in your workflow file, which is a YAML syntax, which allows you to run a cron tab or maybe any scripts that you might have, all right? So this is how you would build or define an action. You have various different types of action for that. When you would like to piece the puzzles together, when you want to use a few of the actions together in a workflow that you would like to define, what you would need to be doing is first create a folder called workflows in a special folder called .github. In that workflows folder, you need to have a predefined or well-defined YAML file. So that's represented here as workflow-file-name YAML. And once you've configured this information, the moment you trigger the workflows, it is actually going to run in a virtual environment. Now, these virtual environment could be either a GitHub hosted virtual environment or a self-hosted virtual environment. In short, we will call these virtual environment as runners, all right? So to be able to use an action, you will need to reference it as part of a workflow. And when the workflow is triggered, it's going to be loaded and run into from a virtual platform, which could be either a self-hosted runner or a GitHub hosted runner, right? In short, the lay of the land, the process involves you building an action, making sure it's atomic enough to be reusable. You need to consume the action in your specific repositories. When an event is triggered to run the action, it's going to be executed either in a self-hosted runner or a GitHub hosted runner, right? So that's the lay of the land. And from there, what we're going to do is dive a little bit deeper into the workflow file. In the workflow file, you're going to have multiple different configuration, and those configurations that you provide is going to directly translate into the actions tab, where you get to keep track of the status of the workflow, the suite that it's going to belong to, the various different jobs that you might have configured in the workflow. You get to see when it was last run, as well as you are able to download the logs. You get the duration of each different steps, as well as the multiple steps that you might have defined, all right? All of these can be accessed through your action step, which we will be going through shortly. With that, I'm going to stop talking very much, and I'm going to directly get into your first hands-on session, which is the setting up the prerequisites and installing our learning lab. I'm going to walk you folks through on how to do it, as well as walk you through the first 6 steps to show you what you need to be looking out for, right? So there is some prerequisites. If you had not gone to the GitHub Satellite workshop repository, there is a shortcut link. And if you would like to follow along the slide decks. The keynote is also exported as a PDF file in the same document. So I'm just going to copy this link and update it in the Slack channel so you folks would have access to it. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here. We need to install Learning Lab. So you have two ways. You could go into lab.github.com, sign in with your GitHub account, accept the terms, and then wait for the installation to be complete. I do realize that there were some questions on making sure that the Learning Lab is only installed to a specific repo instead of all the repo. What we have done is we have improved the installation process. So right now it doesn't really need to be specified for all of your repos, right? So I'm going to walk through the installation. After walking through the installation, what I will be doing is bringing you to the course that you need to be enrolling to complete the hands-on practice, right? From there, we will move on to the first section, which is completing at least 6 steps of the GitHub Actions workshop, right? So I'm going to do all of that. If you're going to follow along, great, it would be nice. If you would like to see what I'm doing first, then continue with the steps. We will time box it for about 15 to 20 minutes so that everyone has enough time to complete the instructions, right? So let's do this. I'm going to go into first lab.github.com. Let's make this a little bit bigger. All right. And in here, I'm going to say start learning or find your first course. So I'm just going to say start learning. I need to log in. So you can see that this is a live demo. It is not pre-recorded. And you get to see that my passwords is all dots. Let's get my authentication code. Two, one. Verified. And then this is the part where you're mentioning that you just need to authorize GitHub. Once you authorize it, this is our 2FA kicking in, multi-factor authentication. So you might not get this screen. Next. And I'm going to just say send a push notification through my Okta. I'm going to approve it and I'm in. All right, so this is taking a little bit of time. I hope you folks are following along. If there's any questions, if you're stuck anywhere, feel free to pop in the chat. Our awesome moderators will help you out in there. All right, so right now, upon installation, I am already in the Learning Lab, and you can see that I have my account assigned in here. And what I'm going to do next is look for the course called Continuous Integration with GitHub Actions. So let's do this. This is the shortcut URL. I'm going to paste that link in the Slack channel as well for you to find it much more easier. As soon as you get into the GitHub Learning Lab course, you could click on Start the Free Course. The moment you click on the big green button, I will need to log in again. Okay. Oh, 885. Authorize it again. Huh. I need to send again the push notification. Anytime now. Done. It should bring me into the course. All right, so you should be presented with this screen where you get to choose whether you want to create the course as a public or a private repository. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to make it as a public so that everyone gets to see it. I'm going to say begin GitHub Actions continuous integration. And you can see that the bot is going to start cloning that repository into my account. Then it's going to publish the course materials, and then it's doing its final touches. As soon as it's done with that steps, I'm going to be presented with this screen with all the different steps that you need to complete. So if you have been following along, great. If you have not, I'm going to give you folks maybe 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to get this set up. And then I'm going to continue with the instructions from step 1 right up to step 6, right? So let's time box this for 10 minutes, right? Right. So there are some questions on the chat. So what I'm doing right now is the 10 minutes is for everybody to get installed with the Learning Lab. And then I'm going to walk everyone through the different steps that we need to complete, which is the 6 steps. Right. So while the countdown timer goes, I'm going to quickly check in the Slack if there's any questions. So, folks, just a quick tip. If you have really any pressing issues with the Learning Lab installation or so, it would be easier for us to, if you could add mention my handle or any one of the moderators' handle so that we could immediately take a look at what's going on, right? So, Charles, we have not yet started the steps. Once you have installed Learning Lab, what's going to happen is you will be presented with this screen here with the different steps that you could start with. If you're already at this step or this page, I would say just hang in there for a while. Then I'll continue with the steps 1 right up to 6. I'm scrolling through to see if there's any other questions that's not answered. Let's see. All right, so I think everyone should be in a good place. What I'm going to do is, I think we will continue with the next steps. So I'm going to just clear the timer right now and then get back into the steps. So for our first work session, what we're going to do is complete at least the first 6 steps, where we're going to use a templated workflow. We're going to run the workflow, fix a little bit of the bugs, and then merge that particular changes into the repository that was already cloned in your account, right? So the first step is making sure that we click on the start button. So I'm going to do that. I'm clicking on the start button, and what we will be presented is you will have a repository called GitHub-Actions-4-CI in your own account. And in there will be a issue that the bot, the Learning Lab bot, will create for you. You could go through the context. It's going to explain to you what is CI, how is it actually linked to Learning Lab, and what's really important is you need to pay attention to step number 1 and beyond. All right. So this is going to give you a list of activity that you need to complete accordingly for the next step to be posted by the bot. So I'm going to give you an example of how you could go about completing the steps. Over here, let me just make this a little bit more bigger. Oh, this is good. Yeah. All right. So step number 1 in my first issue, it says that go to the Actions tab, choose the Node.js workflow template, make sure you commit the workflow to a new branch and create a pull request. I'm going to say commit new file. And the moment I commit the new file, what's important is the title of your pull request. So this is where I'm going to paste what I copied earlier. It's CI for Node. And then I'm going to say create the pull request. The moment I create the pull request, what's going to happen is the bot will be responding in my pull request itself. All right. So it's going to respond with the second step that I need to complete. All right. So over here, it says that it's going to respond when the workflow finishes running. You could follow along the action step. So when I click on the action step, it's going to bring me into the action step, and then it's going to allow me to, I have the option to click and take a look at all of the different job that's running. And over here, I get to see the different steps that's being run. I could expand and take a look at all of the different logs that is being output from each and every one of those steps, right? What I'm interested at this point is to go back into the pull request. I'm going to go into the CI for Node. So this was the pull request that I created earlier. And over here, the bot's also explaining the various different sections of your workflow file, starting from on. So it's an explanation of what this particular keyword is, why would you need it. We also have jobs, why would you need jobs? And then some of the common vocabularies that we might be using in your standard workflow files. And finally, the run option, right? So as soon as the workflow is already triggered and it's completed running, the bot will post a new instruction in the command. And in this instruction, what it's going to do is it's going to tell me that I need to add my first test. All right. So it's going to ask me to navigate to the open pull request title, add just test, and then merge that pull request into this current branch. So what I can very quickly do is either click on the link here, or I could just go into the pull request tab and click on add just test. All right. And what's going to happen is I just need to merge this pull request. So I'm going to merge the pull request, confirm the merge. Good housekeeping practice is to delete the branch once you have merged the changes. As soon as you've merged, the bot's going to be responding and letting you know to go to the next step. So you can click on the link over here, which is the next step. I'm going to click on the link here. It brings me back into the existing workflow that I've created, right? So this was step 3 that I just completed. And then next I have step number 4, which is asking me to read the actions log and comment the name of the test which is failing. So how am I going to grab that information? I first need to actually navigate to the Actions tab. So I'm going to scroll up to the Actions tab. I'm going to click on the Actions tab here. I'm going to go to the CI for Node. I'm going to click on this. And then I'm going to click on either one of the builds here, all right? And then I have a failing test. I'm going to expand it. And I'm going to read the log, and it's going to tell me that this is the test that's failed. And the name of the test is, this is not the one. So this is the older one. Let me go back. Oh, so I should have chosen the second CI for Node because this branch contains the unit test that we have just added from the earlier pull request that I've merged, right? So I'm going to click on the CI, go back to the build here, and then I have the failing test. And in this failing test, I get to choose the name of the test that is required. So I get to see that there's a game.test.js, and then the function that's failing is, where's the name of the file? So this is the initialize with 2 players. I'm going to copy one of the failing test name. I'm going to go back into the pull request, go back to the CI for Node. And then in the comments tab, reply comments tab, I'm just going to paste the name of the test. And I'm going to say comment. As soon as I comment, you can see that the bot replies, right? Once the bot replies, it tells you that this is the test that is failing. The bot is also kind enough to propose some changes to actually make those tests from failing to be showing up as a green tick, right? So what I would do is I would recommend you folks to use the commit suggestion so that you don't need to be like typing and create some accidental typos. So I'm just going to say use the commit suggestion and then click on the commit changes here. And once that's already committed, the bot will be responding. And keep in mind that sometimes the bot is a little bit slow to respond. It's just making API calls. In the background, what's happening is GitHub Learning Lab is a Probot application. It's listening to some webhooks, some events, and based on that events, it's utilizing the APIs to post the replies of the next steps, right? So I'm just going to refresh this, right? So as soon as the CI test is going to be passing, I would be having a merge request button showing as a green button because the bot is also going to review and approve this particular changes. And that kind of brings us to fixing and then completing step number 6, all right? So what I've essentially done is explain to you folks with some examples on how you would be here. The bot's already replied me. So it says that, hey, great job. It's going to respond and I could go ahead and merge the change. So I have everything is passing. I'm just going to merge the pull request, commit the merge. And as a good housekeeping practice, I delete the branch, right? So as soon as I've done that, it's going to tell me, let's go to the next step. But the next step is actually going to be our second hands-on practice. What I would like to do is time box for 15 minutes or 10 minutes. We'll go with 10 minutes first, and then we'll extend if we need more additional time. And then I will do a bit of a recap, what actually happened. And from there, we'll move on to the second hands-on activity, right? So with that, I am going to just start the timer. While that's going on, I'm going to check if there's any other questions that I've missed. That's a good one, Doug. Looking at the chat in Slack, I think there's a few of us who are still trying to catch up on things. So I think it would be good to extend the time. So I'm going to extend for another five plus minutes before I start explaining the different steps. Yeah. All right, so I've been following the chat thread, and I think there are some folks who are stuck in the different steps. So what I would recommend is, if you are stuck and you're not sure which step you are currently in, I'm going to drop a link. This link is, again, going back into the overview of the steps page for the GitHub Actions Continuous Integration course. What you could do is come back in here, and if you do a refresh, it will let you know exactly where you are in terms of the steps. And then you would be able to just click on resume, so that it brings you directly to the issue of the pull request where the bot replied to at the latest reply of the bot, right? And then you could start resuming and following the instructions from the bot. It would give you a response based on where you are going to resume from. Yeah. Oh, okay. Choose. So we have not yet, Paul, if you're listening in, we have not yet started step number 7. All right, great. So if everybody's at step number 7, good. We could start on with the second section. Yeah, cool, nice. Let's see. Great bad name. Nice. That's a nice, good one, Thomas. All right. So what I'm going to do next is, in the interest of time, very quickly, I do understand that, the instructions which I showed was, I might have gone a little bit fast. The only reason why I picked up the pace is because that the instructions are actually repeated in the Learning Lab courses. So you can always go back and do the steps one by one and again. I just wanted to show you folks on what you need to be doing. So with that, I'm gonna go back into the slide deck. And for the first part of the work session, we have completed the first 6 steps. And the first 6 steps, what it actually did was, if you were to look at the complete story, what happened was there were some events that were happening on GitHub. So these events were your push events, or you opening up a PR, or whether you're commenting on an issue or so, right? And those events triggered a workflow. And this is the template workflow that we created from the community page, right? Which was just the Node.js starter template, all right? And from this workflow, or in this workflow, we are actually depending on a action, all right? And this action is basically running some scripts, which is your npm build as well as npm test scripts. And those scripts are actually executed or run in a runner which is hosted on the GitHub platform, all right? So you could see that for an workflow or action to be triggered, you need to have some kind of an event happening on the GitHub site, all right? So from the event, a workflow will be triggered. A workflow will depend either on one or more actions, and those actions will need to be run in a virtual environment. So try and keep this mental model at the back of your mind as and when we progress with the course, because it's going to come in really handy, right? So that was, the earlier diagram was like the entire complete story on where you started and where it ended. Right now, what I'm going to do is explain the relationship between a workflow, job, steps, and actions using this particular diagram. So we have your CI action, that is your repository. And in that repository, right up to now, we had only created one workflow file, right? And this workflow file is going to contain one job as well as several steps in there. And these steps are actually utilizing one or more actions, all right? So if you were to look at the workflow file right now, you would have seen that there is probably 2 actions that's being used. One is the checkout action, that's version 2, which we need to upgrade the cost to, right? And that particular action, what it's doing is it's just making sure that the code in your repository is available in the virtual environment for GitHub to actually use and continue with some interactions that you might build into the subsequent actions or steps that you might have, right? And from there, I would like to zoom in a little bit on jobs, right? Now, each of these jobs is actually going to be run in a virtual environment. And in so far, what we have is just one job that is being run in one virtual environment. And if you look at complex workflows or actions that's out there in the community, you will see that the different jobs need to actually share artifacts or packages between the runs or between the steps. All right. So in our next example, what we are going to be doing is we are going to create two jobs. The first job is going to utilize an action called upload artifact. What it's going to do is it's actually going to build the npm package, the repository, the tic-tac-toe game. It's going to build the artifact, and then it's going to use an action to upload it as a package. And then in the tests job, what we're going to do is we're going to use another action called download artifact, and it's going to download that same specific artifact into the second job for you to be able to continue with the workflow that you're going to be creating. So that gives us a good segue into our second hands-on section, right? In this section, what we will be doing is we are basically going to add two different jobs and include actions to actually upload and that I could add not only different packages, but I could also specifically get it to target a Windows or a Mac or a Linux environment. So I could include the different OS versions where I would want to run the tests, right? And over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on commit suggestion because it already proposes with the changes that I need to include. So I say commit changes. Right, so as soon as I commit the change, the bot's going to be responding. And this time you will see that there is going to be additional builds being run over here. All right, so you could see that I have one for Ubuntu on 8x and another one for Ubuntu as well on 10x, and another job or matrix for Windows 2016, Node version 8, and Node version 10. So this really opens up the possibilities of having parallel execution of different jobs for any test that you would want to do, where you could deploy to a staging environment or so, right? The job's still running, and this time you would see that I have one failing job, whereas the other ones are passing, right? So let's see what the bot has to say about it. I'm going to refresh. And the bot's going to tell me that, hey, we could actually use multiple jobs, but in the first place, why it was failing is because I'm building it in one section, and then I'm not sharing the artifact with the different jobs that I've created. So to be able to successfully use those artifacts between the jobs, I will need to actually create two different jobs. One is called, let me make this bigger. One is called build or test, all right? And sorry, one is called build. So this is going to be the build job. And then the other one is going to be a test job, all right? So it's going to propose to me, say that if I like to copy and paste, this is the particular code. So again, I want to make sure that I copy and paste correctly. I'm just going to copy and paste this, right? And then I'm going to go back, and the bot's going to tell me that I need to update this particular workflow file. So I'm going to go back to my workflow file here. And okay, see, run some Ubuntu later. So you could see that I have two jobs that's run on Ubuntu, and the test also runs on that. And then I also have a matrix that runs on both Windows as well as the Ubuntu, right? And then let's commit this. This time I'm going to make sure that I commit back into the branch that I've created. Commit that. All right, done. So that's great. All right, so this is there, great. And then I'm going to go back into my conversation tab.
Hey, Prem. Someone actually pointed out there's a typo in that file. If you go back to the matrix part, it says lastest instead of latest. So line 26.
26. All right, cool. That's a good one. That's a good catch. Thanks. Let's edit the file. That's good. So fix typo. Commit the changes. Awesome. That looks great, right? Okay, let's go back to the conversation tab. And in here, let's see what does the bot tells me. All right, so the bot says, great, we're waiting on the test. And then now I need to use the upload action, which is basically here. You could see that it uses the checkout, and now it's going to use the upload artifact. The bot's also kind enough to just propose the suggestion. So I'm going to commit that directly in here. And then you would see that the bot will again propose to use the download artifact right now because it's two separate jobs. So I'm going to say commit the suggestions. And it should be good. Right, so we've done all of that. And now I get to merge the CI. So that kind of brings me until the last step, which is going back to here. Yeah, so this is the merging part. So I can complete by doing the merge on step number 13. I'll merge it. Then I'm going to delete the branch. And that should set me up for step number 14. Awesome. All right. So in the interest of time, let's time box this for probably 10 minutes. And I'm going to pay attention to the chat to see if I've missed out on any other questions. So what we are going to be doing is steps number 7 right up to step number 13. right, so that's the cue for the 10 minutes. I do know everybody is really busy catching up to speed. What I would like to do, because we have a bit of a 30 minutes of buffer, I would like to run through the different steps and then different sections of the workflow, as well as the actions. And then we could circle back into the last hands-on section, which is adding an extra workflow file, right? So in this section, in the second session, what we have done is completing step 7 right up to 13. We added, or we kind of extracted out a build job as well as a test job, right? And then to be able to access artifacts between these two jobs, we were using the upload artifact, the upload artifact actions, as well as the download artifact action. And we also added a build matrix for different operating systems and the different node versions that we wanted to test on those operating platforms, right? So this is still one workflow file that is just doing some test strategies or test automation. In that particular workflow, we've got multiple different jobs, and also we've added build matrix in there. So right up to this point, we have the work session 1 and 2, which is focusing only on the CI workflow. And then in the next hands-on section, we will be adding an approval workflow. This is going to automate the steps of you folks adding an automatic label for a pull request that approves a pull request or merges a pull request that's ready for some reviews and actions, right? Later on in the day, if you're following the CD workshop, you would have the deployment workflow, which Yadav is going to be walking you folks through, right? With that, what I would like to do is to be mindful of the time. I'm going to skip this particular section first, explain a little bit on the concepts that we have, and then come back to the workflow session, right? So with work session number 3, we're just going to add another workflow file, and that workflow file is going to include some logics that you need to copy and paste. The bot's going to walk you through that instruction. Once you have completed that particular instructions, you would have in your .github workflows folder, you should end up having 2 workflow files, 2 YAML files. And in the approval-workflow YAML file, you would have a content similar to this, which is going to have its own name. It's going to have one job and different steps that uses a pull reminders action that was defined in the pull reminders repo, all right? Public actions repo. Going through all of these actions, I think like you could build a workflow, you could include multiple different actions and stuff, but the real power or the real value add that I would like you folks to take away from this workshop is pretty much how can you migrate your existing Azure DevOps or Circle CI or even your Jenkins pipeline, right? So for that, what I'm going to do is open up another screen share. Right? And in this screen share, you will be able to see that there is a side-by-side comparison where over here, I have a Jenkins pipeline. And then I also have over here a GitHub Actions workflow file that you could migrate into. So over here in this Jenkins pipeline, you could see that I'm defining stages, and these stages are going to be actually running a test. And that kind of translates directly into a job, which is called as a test job, all right? And in this test job, what's going to happen is, if I would look at the Jenkins pipeline, you can see that I am testing for the Mac OS as well as on the Linux. I can represent this 2 jobs into one over here. And then this particular matrix is actually going to go back into the OS matrix that I have, right? And then the various different steps are just going to actually say use which particular action, which is checkout, to be able to use the code base of the repo. And then I'm going to set up node, which particular version. I'm just running the scripts over here, right? And we have detailed instructions on how you could actually do the matrix. And let me just open up another share, right? So over here. In the help documentation that we have provided, we have a section that talks about migrating to GitHub Actions. And if you were to click on that particular section, it talks to you on how you could migrate from Circle CI to GitHub Actions, from Azure pipelines, as well as from Jenkins. So if I were to click on the Jenkins, it's going to give me a side-by-side comparison of, what does agents mean in GitHub Action. They're basically runners. They could be either self-hosted or they could be from GitHub itself. You have like agents, posts, and stages. They directly translate into different jobs that you could run on, either a container or include different steps. You also have the common directives, like which environment options or parameters that you would want. You have the equivalent of the action in here. And then we have some parallels as well as max parallel builds here, and a short examples on how you would run a cron tab in a GitHub action. And then you have the complete examples of the Jenkins pipeline here as a GitHub Actions workflow file on the right-hand side of the screen, right? This is, I think, a really value add and great takeaway from the workshop. If you are looking at some additional stuff like how you would like to host your own runners, we also have some documentations in here. If you need some additional reference where you would like to learn what are the different workflow syntaxes, what are the events that actually trigger a workflow, different contextual expression syntax, as well as virtual environments. And if you would like to know what are the different softwares that are installed on those GitHub hosted virtual runners, you could come into the link and you can see that all of the different softwares that comes predefined in here, right? So you get all of the information that you need to start up. And with that, what I would like to do is now go back into the steps. So we're going to complete steps 14 right up to 18. I'm going to breeze through the steps so that you could take a look and understand what the end result will look like. In the event that we're going to run out of time, the Learning Lab course is always going to be there. You folks could always, complete the steps. Hit us up. You have our emails. It's exported out as a PDF. It's in the repository. Drop us a note. We'll be more than happy to help you folks. Yeah. So I'm going to resume this. All right. Oh, this was the error. Let's come back in here. Let's go to the next step. And in the next step, let's see. Why is merging block? So I need to complete, so I need to create a new file in this here. So let's give it this name here. And then I'm going to give it a name called this. So I say, create a new file. The file is over there. I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. And then I'll just say, create approval, commit to the team workflow branch. And you see that I have the second file in here. We're going to go back to the pull request. We have custom workflow. And the custom workflow, the bot's going to propose me what are the different events that I could choose. It gives me a suggestion. I'm going to commit the change. As soon as I commit, it's going to give me another set of instructions. And in here, again, I'm going to say, commit the suggestion that I want to use this approval pull request review. And then this particular step is just going to ask me from my prior knowledge, configure the pull reminder in this particular workflow. So let's see. Okay, so let's go back in here. That's that. Go back to files change. Yeah, so I need to edit this file and I need to complete the steps here. In the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to go back in this pull request here. I'm going to say int comment, and the bot should give me a commit suggestion. I'm going to commit that file in. That is done. And then now we just going to need to turn on branch protection. So I'm just going to go to the branch settings. I'm going to say add a rule, give it master branch, so require pull request reviews, dismiss, and then I'm going to say that require status check to pass. I want the branches to be update, and I want the bill to complete, and then I want the bill for 10 and 8, and then I want the bill. No, I don't need the bill. I just need the test there. So I need the test for 10, and then test on the windows as well. They create, save the changes. It should be there. If I were to go back into the pull request, the job's been added, and then finally it's going to run. Then the bot's going to approve all of these changes. Then I should be able to merge and complete all of the different steps that are listed in here. All right, so that was the last step. So let's wait for the jobs to run and the bot should be responding. In the meantime, what I would propose is for us to use the last 15 minutes to complete as many steps as possible. And I will be paying attention to the chat window in Slack to see if there's any questions that I've missed that could use my attention. Yeah. So let's start back.
I just sent you a list of Q&A that have been asked throughout the workshop.
Okay,
And
cool.
I have answers there as well. And for any links, I can paste them into the chat.
Yeah.
It might be nice to speak to them verbally since some of the answers were in threads.
Yeah, so I'll recap on those questions. Thanks, Thomas. All right, so as we are getting closer to the end of the workshop, what I'm going to do is very quickly recap some of the questions. So you could continue just working on the background while I post and answer some of the questions. Starting with the first question, are the slides going to be provided after? Yes, the slides are going to be in this particular CI with Actions workshop repo. In fact, they're already there as a PDF document, right? So they're there. The next one, what is the difference between build 10x and build 12x? Basically, it's a version of Node 10x and Node 12x that ran in different matrix on different OS platforms. The next question, will the recording of the talk be available after the course? Yes. All attendees will receive a copy of the recording after the workshop. Next question. Are workflows conceptually similar to Jenkins pipeline? Yes, they are conceptually similar. In fact, we have a path where you could migrate from the Jenkins pipeline into workflow syntaxes, and the links are actually already dropped in the resources section of the PDF document, which is shared. Next question. I like the bot, especially suggestions for fixes. Would be nice to integrate it at work. How do I get this? So the bot that you folks see, the Learning Lab bot, it's basically a GitHub app. It's using ProBot to listen to webhook events, and it's going to respond to those events using our GitHub APIs, right? So there is in-depth course information. If you go to lab.github.com/GHE, so I'm going to drop the link. in the channel shortly. You will be able to go through the documentations and learn quite a bit of the app, right? Next question. How can I retake this Learning Lab course if I wanted to? It's going to be as simple as, let's say I've completed the steps. You could just go in here, leave the course. So when you say leave the course, it's going to ask you whether do you want to delete the course repository, yes or no. And then you would be able to unregister. So I can always say delete and then continue to unregister. So you can always retake and re-enroll as many times as you would like. Right? Then what are possible OS targets? Is it possible to use a custom OS? Yes, you could do a custom OS, but that's going to be a self-hosted runner. And there is documentation on how you could host your own runners and what are the basic prerequisites that you need to meet, right? Currently, we do support Windows Server 2019, Ubuntu 18.04, 16.04, and Mac OS Catalina 10.15. Just to be thorough, the software that's going to be available is also listed in a documentation link, which we will provide. And then next one, Ubuntu 20.04, is it going to be supported anytime soon? So we have internally started working on preparing those image, but we don't have an actual ETA to share for you folks today on that. So this is the next interesting, it's a very good question where it says, if we do not mention Node.js matrix in the build, which version of Node will be used by default? So this is something that you need to shift into the action repo itself, meaning that when you define an action in the repository, you would have an additional file called action.yaml. In that action.yaml, you will be specifying the node version that is going to be the default version that you are required to run the action, right? And that's covered in the section where on how to build a GitHub action, right? Are there any additional trainings besides Learning Lab and GitHub Actions because they have a steep learning curve? Yes, we from professional services do provide official trainings. Just reach out to services@github.com. We also have official YouTube channel on GitHub, a GitHub YouTube channel that would have all of the different videos which is going to help in your learning curve. Last but not least, all of these questions and answers that we have just explained will be converted into a FAQ markdown document that will live in the same repository of the CI with Actions repo in the GitHub Satellite workshop. So you don't need to memorize the answers. It's going to be available for you in the form of a FAQ document, right? With that, I think some parting thoughts. Why would you want to use Actions? It's simply because, you know, it's the house of where 50 million developers are using, and imagine the creativity that each and every one of us have to bring to the table. And since it's going to be a public repository, you would be able to look at the code in a very transparent way. It's on GitHub, so it takes advantage of all the security best practices. All you need to do is just point a reference to that actions in your workflow files that you're going to define. And it's going to be as easy as 1, 2, 3 to point the dependencies, use it into your workflow with all the transparencies and the log information that you would get at your hand. It's following an open and component-based design for continuous integration. It's all going to be in one single platform, so you save a lot of time in context switching. It's also OS agnostic, and it uses the GitHub's open API to drive at the core or the heart of the actions, right? And we do have some resources for you folks. The help documentation is pretty legit. It's kind of tight. It has every single information that you need to be up and running with GitHub Actions. Beyond that, if you would like to explore the available actions, you could go into the marketplace. And if you would like to already consume some actions that GitHub has built, you can go into this particular link. It gives you all of the available actions. And then you also could go to the actions desk. This is also another repository there. And then we also have repos that are built by GitHubbers in here, right? There are some starter workflows here. There's Node.js ones. I think there is also a JavaScript action. And the neat thing about this actions here is that you could use them as a template to kickstart your own version of actions that you would like to build, right? So you would have a scaffolding or a template created automatically for you, right? With that, I think I would like to conclude the workshop, but I'm going to stick around for a while if there's any other questions that are unanswered in the Slack channel. And we hope that you've had a great learning experience with us. Thank you all.